Welcome back. All right, so over my week off, I was reading and listening, paying attention. So I was obviously at Disneyland for a week. We also had a meetup. It was great for those who attended. It was awesome. By meetup, I mean we went out. We had food. I didn't even finish my food, but we had great conversations. We were there for hours, talking about hockey. And what's great is that I can have a meetup here in the Vancouver area, Abbotsford. I can have a meetup in Las Vegas. I can have a meetup in Anaheim. And no matter where hockey fans talk, it's the same conversation. So I'll start off with this. Now, I have this Gary Bettman picture on the set. And there are people that look at that and go, oh, Gary Bettman picture. I'm going to unsubscribe. And there's the reason that picture's there, it's sort of a wink and a nod towards early on people saying, oh, he makes excuses for the NHL. Clearly, he's on the take. The NHL has never paid me a cent for this channel, and that's reality. Now, I'm older than a lot of the people that view the channel, and I think a lot of the things that would have upset me 20, 30 years ago, they just don't now. And I understand, but I think we get caught up. I think we get caught up in so much hate for him that there's a lot more to it than that. Now, could the NHL be bigger? Yes. Is some of that on Gary? Absolutely. I don't think expanding the playoffs is something that Gary's wrong about. I think the idea of adding, well, they should add an extra round or make it so there's play ins. No, 16 to 32 teams make the playoffs. That's right. That to me is the right thing to do because it's just chasing money to add to the playoffs. And you're potentially making it so you're handing out the Stanley Cup later or whatever they're doing. Now, if they go to an 84 game schedule, so every team plays each other the same amount of times, you have a balanced schedule, I'm all in favor of that. That's perfect. That's a great idea. And we can have the debate over which divisions are tougher, sure, but divisions aren't going anywhere, right? And that's an argument that can be made in any league. You look at the National Football League, you're going to have teams win their division that have really rotten records and teams that end up being wild cards because the division leader has a fantastic record. And it's not always fair, it's not always elegant. Baseball's had that problem. It is not something that's this new. And I know basketball. I remember, the West was much stronger than the East. At times, the East much stronger than the West in the NBA. It's just, and it was cyclical with basketball as well. When I followed that as closely as I did. Now, the NHL, the discussion is about a couple of things. So ratings are down 20% for ESPN and TNT from where they were last year. First off, I think there was a curiosity factor last year that's gone this year. Secondly, I think that the broadcasts have at times been harder to watch. I think local blackouts need to be gone. And that's something I talked about in Anaheim the other night. That I think local blackouts, and I understand the point, I understand all this, but the National Hockey League is the smallest of the major sports out of football, basketball, baseball, hockey. And MLS, the argument can be made about whether or not MLS has aggressively expanded too much, and if they're taking expansion money to try to make up for losses elsewhere. And that's a discussion that was out there years ago. But the reality is that it is a very crowded sports atmosphere, and it is an environment that the NHL finds itself in, trying to get a bigger cut. Now, they sometimes make business decisions which hurt the actual overall business because see these dollar signs, that's what they see. So we go all the way back, right? So from 1985 till 2004, ESPN, the NHL, that was the standard. And ESPN went to the National Hockey League and said, here's what we're willing to offer. Here's what we think you're worth. Now, we're not going to get into the dollars here because it's not important. That's almost 20 years ago. What's important is Versus came out and said, we'll give you more than twice that. And ESPN said, the rates aren't worth that. So the NHL said, we'll go with Versus. And the NHL went to, notice it's 2004, so this is right before the lockout. They went from being on nationwide TV to being really difficult to find in the United States, where apparently they're trying to find a foothold. Because money. But money. We like our money. And this is where they get in the way of themselves because they just look at the rights deal and they go, well, this rights deal is worth a lot of money. So because Versus is going to give us all this money, money and money, because money. So money. Not thinking ahead to, okay, so if we go to Versus, we're not going to get the same amount of ad revenue. It's going to sink us in terms of ratings across the country. It's going to take us out of the conversation. I'm old enough to remember when the NHL was actually bigger than the NBA, and the NBA used really smart marketing and just really smart league building to make themselves a big deal and make their stars a big deal. And we've had this discussion, and that's the thing. I wanted to make sure I went at this from a different angle because this is something we've discussed on this channel before. And the argument I keep thinking of tonight is it reminds me of, I'm going to use a wrestling reference. Stick with me. Vince McMahon, the man who owned WWE at the time, still does. At the time I'm recording this, anyways, could sell at any time. That his business ventures had caused him to become a millionaire instead of a billionaire. And this is what CM Punk said during a promo, which may or may not have been scripted. It wasn't. But I'm going to, if I say it wasn't, people are going to be like, well, I think it was. Fine. Whatever. But there's some truth to that. That here was a man who had this business in pro wrestling. And whatever you think of it, it is a lucrative business. And in his pursuit of something bigger and better, hurt his own business and hurt his own money to the point where he was no longer a billionaire. Where the NHL comes in on this is that they will look at situations that are roughly equivalent on some level, and they just get distracted by the dollar signs over here, so that when you start looking at it and you really get into the depths of it, you go, well, wait a minute, this is a better idea. They go, yeah, but money. Now, right now, the NHL's saying that revenues could be as high as $6 billion. And people are going to point, and I've already seen this, pointing and going, well, why isn't the salary cap going up? Salary cap's not going up because the players owe all that escrow, all that extra money from the shutdown in 2020. The shutdown in 2020, because of the business model being 50% tied, 50% tied, and all this, that the players owe approximately, I think it was more than $1 billion coming into this season. Now, what that $6 billion, if that ends up being the revenue, does is it means that they pay it off sooner. So, yes, the salary cap will go up by a lot sooner. But because the NHL and the players are 50% business partners, they made the wrong decision in 2020. The wrong decision in 2020 was, so we've lost all this money, the cap has to drop. We need to prorate contracts. Something that I know people are going to say, well, that would have been terrible. But it all would have come back. So the NHL's kind of bit off its nose to spite its face. And it's in this situation where, and again, I understand they're 50-50 business partners. I've said it myself in videos many times over. But it has left this public perception that the NHL's being really cheap. And that they're lying about the revenues. And they're not letting the players make their money when they put themselves and the players into a bunch of debt. Now, inflation has been ridiculous. It's been ridiculous in Canada. It's been ridiculous in the United States. So when the NHL says we're making $6 billion, okay, sure. But with inflation, how much does that help? Because the cost of everything's gone up. So the cost of everything's gone up for the NHL as well. Now, 2020 definitely made it so that we saw more and more of this, right? We saw all of a sudden, instead of, say, gradually bringing in extra ad revenue, it became, okay, we're going to have ad revenue on the helmets, we're going to have ad revenue on the jerseys, we're going to put ad revenue on the ice. There's going to be this new TV deal. Oh, we're going to allow all the sports gambling. That's going to be in between. Every commercial is going to be about sports gambling. We're going to have every sports line at the start. We're going to have gambling segments during every intermission. Also, we're going to make it so that the boards have digital ads. And sometimes guys will be in a bit of a scrum along the boards and their whole torso is going to disappear into the ad. But we're going to tell people that those board ads are okay. Coming back to where I started this, I have talked to people in this area. I have talked to people online that I know from Las Vegas. I now have talked to people in person in Anaheim. I haven't found a single person that said, Board advertising is kind of fun. This dynamic board advertising, it's fine. Everybody said the same thing. It's distracting. It's eye-catching, which is what the advertisers want. What I found funny was Gary Bettman saying, well, if you're looking at the ads, you're not looking in the right place. That to me, and I can't say somebody's lying, may not have been 100% of the truth, though. May not have been 100%, because they're designed to be distracting. So money reasons mean the NHL is going to put 32 teams. That's not the way to do this. So when you're bringing something in, do you just throw it at everybody at the same time? No, you beta test it. You run a little test. So here's and I was spitballing this on the plane on the way home, because this is what I do. So when I don't make videos, people are like, "I should just take a break." This is what I do. I come up with these kind of rant ideas. So you get this idea you're going to put digital ads on the boards. And it all comes back to this: money. More money. And the NHL has said the board ads are generating more money than they thought they would. They're getting more revenue than they thought. Test it. So you don't want to have to pay, say, $200 for NHL Center Ice. And they go, all right, you don't want to pay $200 for NHL Center Ice. You can give us $100 for NHL Center Ice. But here's the trade-off. You're going to get digital board advertising. So for the person who's paying $200, they're not going to see those digital board ads. But if you're watching the feed for the $100, now I understand this may not be as feasible as I'm describing it, but this is kind of what I'm getting at is come up with a model where and I mean Netflix is a really awful example, but it's the one that comes to mind because I'm kind of having brain fog. I'm so tired. But have the ad supported model. See if people buy it. See if people like it. And not only that, but take that feedback. What if the board ads were digitalized for like 5 minutes of a period? The first 5 minutes of the period. What if it was the first 8 minutes? What if the rest of the period they're not, and we just see the regular ads on the boards? Sweet deal, right? And this is the thing. It's the everything or nothing that drives me crazy. And it's definitely been sped up. It's been sped up. We got jersey ads that we didn't really want. We got helmet ads, which not really big deal. I don't really care what's on the guy's helmet. But some of the jersey ads are kind of obnoxious. And some team stores sell them defaulting to the actual advertisement on there. Now, thankfully, if you get your jerseys through Cool Hockey, if you get your jerseys through the NHL store, I haven't seen any actually come from NHL.com, from the NHL shop, that have the ads on them yet, right? And I think part of that is because sometimes they'll make those digital ad, memberships and relationships work pretty late into the season, and because jerseys are manufactured so far out from the actual sales to scrubs like you and me, that it doesn't work. You can't have the overseas market basically building these to come over here. So the only ones that would have the right ads would probably be a made in Canada. You don't really get a made in Canada that you're spending a lot of money on, thinking at least I'm getting the right advertisement on it. But the board advertising to me is another problem. And I think when you look at the 20% drop in viewership, and then you see Bettman out there saying, we're making record money. Yes, but you're shedding viewers. And when fans say we don't like this, your answer is you shouldn't be paying attention to that. And somewhere there'd have to be an advertiser going, the NHL assured us that these advertisements were definitely going to be viewed, and we're definitely going to be affecting our income. The ads aren't there, so you won't notice them. Board ads I could ignore most of the time, but when they're flashing and when you got a puck scrolling along, you can't. Just because you can doesn't mean you should. This is an old phrase, and I had to look this up, because there's various forms of this I have heard over my lifetime. Just because you can make more money right now Doesn't mean you should. Not because it's bad for business, not because I don't think that capitalism can't do cool things, not because I think that all advertising is bad, but because if you shove all this in at the same time, the program gets really loud. Because now instead of watching a hockey game, during the game, you've got up in one corner, you might have a chyron telling you, hey, if you bet on this game right now, you'll win $500. If you bet 100 on this team, you'll be and then you've got a flashing digital board ad at the bottom of it. You might have a tail on a puck if you're watching the Anaheim feed on the power play, and it just becomes too much. And it can make the program look like a cartoon, or just it doesn't feel the same. One argument, though, that I wanted to get into as well with this is that I saw in the one article I was reading last week that more goals means a better game, and that the NHL doesn't have enough scoring, and that this is part of the problem, and this is why the ratings are down. I haven't heard a single fan say, I turned the game off because it was 2-2 in the third period. I don't watch hockey anymore because there's only 6 goals a game. If there was 7, I'd watch. It's not true. I think the product on the ice is the best it's ever been. I also think the athletes are the best they've ever been. It doesn't mean that the athletes that were around in the 80s and 90s weren't really good too, because they were. We don't see brand new cars, brand new jets, brand new things being created and then just go out and take the old ones out behind the house and beat them with a stick. It's not how it works. Stupid car made 1983. Like, it's not a thing. We don't have to have the argument of, well, that generation was crap. This generation's great. No, this generation could be great. That generation can be great too. Because it's a different time. It's a different time. It's a different environment. It is a bit of a different game. It's fast. I've watched games this year that aren't very good, that have had really high scores. I've watched boring games that have had high scores. And I've watched thrilling games that were scoreless going into the third period, where I'm on the edge of my seat. I stand all day, but I'm on the edge of my seat, just speaking, not literally, because it's an exciting game. Maybe there's been a bunch of hitting. Maybe these teams really don't like each other. Maybe it's got like some really strong ramification in the standings. People get distracted by things, and it's what really frustrates me. The most important thing is, if you want the game to be popular, if you want people to watch, you have to make it the most presentable game that it can be. And it doesn't mean fantastic goals all the time. Like when I hear, well, they have to allow these because these goals are pretty. And deciding to change offside rules just because there might be a pretty goal that's disallowed seems odd. Because if a goal's ugly, I don't say, man, I wish that goal hadn't counted because it was ugly. Did you see that it just went in off his skate? He wasn't even looking at the play. That shouldn't have counted. So it's an odd argument, right? But the NHL really seems to value the money more than the happy fans. So when we talk about Gary Bettman getting booed, and I've said Bettman works for the owners, and he does. If Bettman was consistently not bringing in dollars, because all they really seem to be worried about is, are we making more money? And Gary sits down and goes, you guys are making about $1 billion more than you were 5 years ago. And they go, good job, Gary. That's great. Split it 32 ways. It's a lot of money for us. Sure, we give half of it to the players, but it's more money for us. So it's better. And that's despite Arizona playing out of an arena that's got 5,000 fans in it, right? And Arizona always gets thrown out there too. And I think we take our eye off what the really interesting part of this is. The on TV product that there wasn't anything wrong with has been tinkered with over and over and over. And I don't know where it ends. So right now we have the digital ads, right? Right now we have the jersey ads. So how long is it till the NHL says, so we're going to put a couple of ads on the back. They're going to be small. You won't see them. They're going to be small. They won't match the rest of the jersey. They'll be a completely different color. So you'll notice them every time the guys skate by. But you won't notice them. And we're going to make an extra few $1 million off each ad, right? Because again, this is what they're chasing. And I don't think they'll ever end up looking like European hockey. But I've watched some European hockey games on TSN. I haven't seen digital boards. I haven't seen ads projected onto the glass. I haven't seen endless advertising for gambling. I haven't seen it. I've seen hockey that, sure, the product, the quality of the player is not at the National Hockey League level. But these guys are still trying, they're still playing, and it's still hockey. It's still hockey. It's a good game. It's fun to watch. And I think the NHL, with 2020 and with that loss in revenue that took place, it just suddenly that pause hit. I think there were probably a bunch of ideas Bettman had, maybe somebody else had in marketing. We can make more money. Here's 6 different ideas of how we can make more money. And all of them got greenlit. That's the way it seems to me. And again, could be completely wrong, because again, as an outsider. But in pursuing that money, you're going to alienate a portion of your audience. In pursuing that money, well, you're blacking out fans who have supported the league for decades. You're going to lose a portion of that audience. When those broadcasts have glitches, and there have been glitches, I know I've seen it with some of the ESPN stuff, it's going to affect people. They're going to be like, man, I watched that ESPN feed last week and I had glitching problems. You know what? This week, I'm not watching it. And it doesn't take very long. And we get caught up on the stuff that, again, we get caught up on, well, remember the game back in the 90s? Well, that's not coming back. The game's different. You have how many coaches behind the bench? They're all trying to protect from goals being scored. There's generally, coaches want to make sure that the defensive game is taken care of. And we've always seemed to gravitate in the National Hockey League towards less goals rather than more. Right now, the goal scoring is fine. It's absolutely fine. The league doesn't need to do anything to encourage goal scoring at all. The comparison I saw too was football. I don't think an NFL game's more exciting when it's 48-46 than when it's 21-17. I might be in the minority, but some of the best football games I've ever watched, the final score was 20-18. I've seen great football games where the score's 15-12 because of how it's played, who's playing, and just because of, you can see this chess match going on, and it's not boring in how it's being done. I've seen some boring games though where the score might be 38-24. Maybe it's 38-3 at the half, and the team with the lead just decides we've got this huge lead, and so the team with this losing gets 3 touchdowns in the second half, and so you've got 62 points, and nobody watched the second half. Whereas that game that was 12-11 on the other channel, people are riveted. It's close. You've got to have drama. And it can be hard to get into the drama when you're so distracted with everything else going on the screen, because it's all with the money. And it's that balancing act. And I can say this too from a YouTube perspective, that there are times along the way where I could have made more money doing this than I have, that I have said I can't do that because it would negatively impact the product I'm putting out there. Yeah, I could make a couple extra grand a month. I could make good money, but it's going to negatively impact my product. Sure, there will be people who say, hey, Shannon's doing what he has to. He's doing what he has to provide for his family. He's doing what he has to provide for people in his life and to make sure that they're taken care of. And we respect him for that. So we will put up with that extra advertising. We'll put up with that obnoxious banner in the background. We'll put up with. But I've looked at it and said, I can't do that. I can't go down that path. And it's something that, again, I explained when I was in Anaheim this past week. And it's not in my nature. I can't do it. I can't do it. I can't chase these dollars and say, well, I did this because I could. Because I shouldn't have. So yeah, if I was commissioner of the NHL, I'd last like probably a week. Because I would sit in a boardroom and go, so we got to get rid of these digital ads. And the owner said, but they're making us all this extra money. And my answer was, yeah, but it's ticking off the fans. And how about we make it so the All-Star game is not necessarily competitive, but make it more interesting. Let's get rid of the weird, gimmicky stuff. and make it so that there's some kind of year over year competition. It used to be that every year you'd go, hey, remember last year Ray Bork did that? Remember the accuracy with Ray Bork? And we all talked about it. We all knew. And every year there was these and then at some point in time it became, got to make it more of a show. It's got to be more of a show. Let's make it more fun. And it gets to the point where I saw a lot of people talking about the players aren't even trying in the skills competition. This is not how it's supposed to work. It's really not how it's supposed to work. But in the end, it comes down to dollars. Somebody somewhere said, hey, if we do it this way, we make more money. Make more money. And you can make that money now, but you're costing yourself that money later. And I think that's the conversation that I don't think we have enough. Is rather than complaining about the state of the game right now, state of officiating, state of it, you have to produce the product so that it is a product that on television is an easy watch. You shouldn't be sitting there right now and saying, you know, I watched an AHL game last night. I really enjoyed it. It was fun. It was great. The NHL game is just all this crap they're trying to get you to buy, and there's all this flashing all over the place. AHL game is nice and basic. And I think hockey is best when it's nice and basic. And that's just me. I'm just speaking for myself. And I think that's part of where the conversation sometimes goes offside. I'd be interested to know your thoughts. Because I really think that if the NHL had kept things basic the whole way through and just stuck to the old-fashioned traditions of the game, well, you can still do things to bring in new viewers. You can still have various tutorials on introducing people to the game without changing all of it in its visual presentation on TV. Because the on-ice product is the best it's ever been. These guys do things we can't imagine. We couldn't have imagined 30 years ago. But it just feels like all the rest of the soul gets taken out of the game. And so it's easier to turn it off. I get it. I totally get it. But let me know your thoughts. And like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. And yeah, I'm wearing Anaheim because we were in Anaheim. And it was a conversation that came up. And I wanted to talk about this. Because it's easy to blame the guy at the top. And he deserves his share of the blame. But there's a lot to go around here. And it is that chase of, we want more money. And if we can make more money, we're going to do it, whether we should or we shouldn't. And I think that costs you more long term. But let me know your thoughts. Thank you guys so much for watching, for all your support. I will talk to you again soon.